Today we have a great panel, and this actually is a group of people that are very experienced in the area of technology applied to reusable assets. I'm Rob Franzo. I have been chairing the technology working group for the Reusable Packaging Association for the past 3.5 years or so. Last year we had a panel talking about the white paper which we published, which all the member companies up here have contributed to in one way or another. And today's session is actually a carry on to the previous with regards to applying technology in reusable assets to solve today's problem for closed loop systems, sustainable systems to reduce footprint and reuse, recycle, but it's specifically reduce and reuse. So with that said, let's turn it over to the panels, and we'll just go down. They'll each introduce themselves and their company.
Thank you, Rob. My name is Tim Dobson. I work with PMG Labels. I've been in the RFID sector for quite a few years now. I understand all aspects of the program, but I specialize in the label portion of everything right now.
Dave Horvat with Real-Time Intelligence. Our company has brought forth a platform for visibility in the supply chain, focused on reusables and enabling all the tools that these guys bring to the market to give you insight to what's moving around.
Mike Vaughn with Orbis Corporation.
Do you got no?
Yep. You good?
We good now?
Yep.
There we go. So Mike Vaughn with Orbis Corporation. I have been in the technology space for probably the past 3-4 years, but Orbis Corporation specializes in plastic reusable containers as well as steel returnable containers. So anytime a customer needs to kind of get involved with tracking their assets, that's where I come into play.
I'm Clay Kopernick with Rarig Pacific Company. Rarig is a solutions provider specifically for the supply chain industry, consisting of reusable and sustainably made plastic products, purpose-built material handling equipment, and integrated technology to track and scan your assets, but also your order information.
Thanks, Clay. Thanks, everybody. So just very quick, just to give a little bit of context, I'm a technologist. I was previously at Qualcomm Technologies. Prior to that, as at Zebra Technologies, Motorola Solution, Broadcom, Bell Labs. And it's all about how you embed within our ecosystem, or all the devices out there, and then the infrastructure, interoperable technology that can give visibility. And what's really cool is we've got a technology guy, we've got a label guy, we've got a data guy, and then we have 2 systems guys, which are around the reusable assets. So we've got the ecosystem very well represented. So to start us off, could each of you just briefly discuss a business problem? Have you heard that recently? A business problem that you're applying the technology, your assets, reusable assets, to solve?
Yeah. So everybody likes to say it all starts with the label, right? And we definitely got it to assess your situation. And the main issues at hand, as we're all here for, is the inventory inaccuracies and locating your products and reducing the losses. So I think one of the biggest challenges on the business side of things is the cost. So when it comes to the label, everybody wants an RFID label at the cost of the price of a regular label. But which is great about the RPA and the websites and the tools that we have at hand, we have ROI calculators to address that issue.
Dave?
Thanks, Rob. So Tim and the guys do a great job of lining up these sessions, because the session, for those of you who were here before, when Bob was up here talking about data, it was a perfect lead into what we're talking about here in this group. And I usually find myself coaching and counseling people moving into this space and trying to understand what their opportunity is to look around, not just your primary objective, but what are your secondary and tertiary objectives are when you put a visibility program in place. So as an example, most people are going to come in with either managing loss. If you have a lot of plastic, you're losing 20-30% of your assets, and some of these industries are lost every year. That may be the primary objective, but managing your cycles, managing your what assets are causing damage, managing your damage, you can be able to tie it back to specific trading partners. The insights you'll be able to drive out of the data you're going to wind up finding a lot of things in that data that you never knew you had access to when you serialize your assets and start tracking their movement through the supply chain. So The use cases are always going to start with one, but my encouraging word for everyone is to check with your peers, check with consultants like the people on the stage here, other groups in the conference here. Look for best case applications, what they have done to build on your ROI model.
So Dave, following you is going to be difficult because a lot of my answers are probably very similar. But what I hear most often when a customer comes in and asking for technology for their assets is, and honestly, their business problem is too limited of a scope. So kind of speaking to what you were just saying, if they come in just looking for asset loss or traceability of a particular asset, that type of a program, if you're limiting it to just that, is going to be very challenging to get up and go. I guess I'm a little off, but it's going to be a challenge to kind of keep that sustaining as a long-running program because it's not enough just to try and identify loss.
Yeah, Clay, did you have anything to add to this, or I can give you the next one to start off?
No, I think just the one piece to add to it is the ability to be proactive in the thought process. It's much easier to solve for supply chain visibility when you start off with a plan in place, starting with the asset and the use case, than it is to go back and try and retrofit or fix a problem that may exist. So that proactiveness is what we try to preach to our customers around. Think about the use case today, even if there is one. But if there isn't, can you build something in to future-proof your supply chain?
Excellent. And so why don't you pick up on, if you think about what are the key parameters, you can't improve something you can't measure. What are some of the things that technologies that you're deploying gives you better insights into key performance indicators and other metrics?
So there's the justification of the investment in a sustainable product. We just had a session on that where I have to be able to show dwell time, I have to show turns, I have to show the justification to move to a sustainable product versus single-use material. So that's kind of table stakes. But then there's the transformation piece that you could look to address around, I have this smart asset that is flowing through my supply chain, whether that's a closed loop supply chain or open-ended where it's touching different partners within the ecosystem. So what can I learn from that asset flowing through the supply chain, reading the different data points, and what can I then do with that data to potentially change the way that what my current state operations look like? Is there something I can transform as far as how I go to market, how I manage my assets? Can I create some additional operational efficiencies from what I've learned? That's just the additional benefit outside of just creating that justification to invest in a core plastic product.
Excellent, thank you. And Mike, from an Orbis perspective, what would you add to what Clay outlined?
So I don't know how many people were here for Bob Klimko's presentation prior, but the discussion regarding kind of understanding your entire loop and taking the big picture to begin with, that's the first thing that you have to start with. Because if I go back to where I started regarding just asset loss, people don't know what they don't know. If they're looking for,
We're gonna get Mike a mic. Dave,
Sure.
You're as the data guy, why don't you fill us in a little bit?
Yeah, I'll help pick up on what both these gentlemen have just shared, and I'll go to specific anecdotes and building on the ROI model that we were talking about. Most customers don't know what they don't know until they have access to this data. At present, we track about 265 million reusable assets around the globe every day, and that gives us incredible insights as to things that are happening if you know how to look for it. A real-world example is one of our customers had some reusable assets returned to them that we had previously marked lost assets. They're lost because we hadn't seen them with a sensor in more than 6 months. And that was our demarcation line to say that this asset probably isn't coming back. It's a candidate to be written off. It's a candidate for loss. And inexplicably, these assets came back through a door. And the really interesting thing about those assets that came back through the door is they immediately went out another door that had a sensor on it to earmark damaged assets to go out to be repaired. Because our analytics were in place to recognize trends and things that were anomalies, we were able to pick up on the fact that something was amiss here. And what wound up being amiss was my customer had a customer taking their assets, using them internally for long periods of time and not returning them because they're good assets to use to move their stuff around. and then they broke, so they sent them back to be fixed, which is kind of it would never been picked up except for the serialization. It was amusing and startling at the same time because we had serialized assets. We were able to see that because all the assets look the same, but when they're serialized, they all look different. And now I can trend analyze what's happening. What customers are holding my assets too long? What product is creating damage to my assets? What customers are breaking my things? Who's not returning my stuff? All these things come into focus, and I may have only been looking for managing loss or managing cycle times. So again, building on what Clay and Mike were sharing is once you start collecting data, the sky's the limit for what you can analyze and assess the data, looking for actionable insights.
Great. We're going to come back to Mike. We're going to come back to Mike, but so Tim, why don't you pick up on the serialization of labels and talk a little bit about
the performance metrics and what we look at. When it comes to the label, I mean, all the data in the world isn't worth anything unless the accuracy is correct. So it all starts with the label and making sure the label is properly constructed the right way for your certain environments and whatnot. And then also too, the material construction has to be viable for the sustainability of the project. So returnable containers is a lot different story than consumer goods. So the labels have to be made in such a fashion to live the whole life cycle for the returnable containers. So those are the two things that we really leverage on when we're building a label, is making sure that the accuracy is 99.99% or greater, and then the materials are manufactured well enough to live the life cycle of the program.
And one other element that I just want to salt in is when we talk about RFID as being a very, RFID labels, obviously the system overall is about what's the cost of acquiring those labels, what's the accuracy of reading those labels. So let's talk a little bit about that element of it. Clay, I think we were just talking about that. Clay, you want to salt into the discussion?
Yeah, and that's as partners here, especially those who manufacture the reusable asset, that due diligence up front around understanding the customer's use case, what's going to go on that asset, where is it going to go throughout the supply chain, how is it going to get read. RFID is a finely engineered solution, and so you really have to do your due diligence up front to ensure that the system is going to perform as intended. And where we can see some issues is when there is a lack of insight into what the intended purpose of that asset is and how it's going to be used, and where the optimal read points would be throughout that supply chain, depending on if it's on a conveyor line or inter-facility or inter-network. Doing that up front should set you up for success, and also opportunity for additional technologies outside of just RFID, whether it's mesh networks, wireless networks, Bluetooth, low energy. There are some gaps that RFID may not be able to solve, but it's very easy to install tags without hurting product performance, whether it's nesting or collapsing, having to be wash resistant. But there's other technologies that you can implement within that supply chain as well to get additional visibility, more real-time location tracking, things of that nature.
Excellent. And Mike, if you're able to salt into that, let's talk a little bit about how how RFID is complemented by active sensors. So RFID is inherently a passive technology that is energized by infrastructure. And then there's obviously battery-powered sensors that give you additional capabilities to measure either temperature or vibration or movement, as well as location. So can you just salt in a little bit about your perspective on it?
So one of the components whenever I have a customer that's asking for any of those external sensors or additional sensors is that something that's going to be visible? In most cases, it's not. It's going to be something that's attached inside of a foot of a pallet, or it is inside wall, or it's hidden from view. It's covert. But to then tie it together with that other piece of information, if they've already begun down the path of RFID, on the front end when you're manufacturing, you link those two types of sensors so that the system recognizes as soon as I see an RFID, I know these other sensors exist. Or conversely, if I'm receiving information from a particular sensor, but it's not identifiable to the outside, I can find that asset, find when there's an issue. So you still need something on the outside of the package to say, hey, this is this particular package, so you know what's wrong if you're trying to problem solve.
Okay, and hopefully everybody's able to hear Mike. I know we're having some audio issues here, but I'm not going to repeat what he said, but the key here is that if you think about the label, the RFID as the identification, the name, the serialized unique name for that, and then the question becomes one of how does that trigger and give an identity and capability within your database. I'm going to get to Dave Horvat in a minute here, because those it's complementing. You need identity, and then that identity gives you some information about through the digital twin or phygital twin, as I like to call it, what are the capabilities of that asset, and then you can do additional things. So Dave, why don't you talk a little bit about how your system at RTI aggregates all that data and gives some of that intelligence into the configuration management.
Sure, and I'm actually going to steal from your line of thought there. We've seen so many impacting anecdotes over the last 4 years of providing this visibility platform. And Mike is right. Marrying multiple technologies just increases exponentially the opportunity here. So another real world example, we have an account that has GPS tags on a small percentage of their fleet because GPS is just not cost effective. So if you have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of reusable assets moving around, you're not going to tag them all. You're going to take a sampling. So you may tag 5% or 10% of your assets with a GPS locator to watch for behaviors and trends and the like. So our account set up geofences around recyclers because their recycle process was they take it back to the manufacturer and only the manufacturer regrinds the plastic to make new assets. So they purposely put geofences around certain locations that their assets should never go. They got a hit. And so they sent someone out to that recycler and they found a whole bunch of assets, not just a few, but a lot, truckloads of assets there. And because we had all of the assets serialized, we were able to tell where they all came from. And it turns out they all came from a repair company who was then recycling the assets on their own. So again, this goes back to when you come in and target a specific use case, and I think one of these two gentlemen mentioned it, sometimes that first use case doesn't give you the complete ROI. That's when you start peeling back the layers and look, what are other people doing to build an additional ROI, a second, a third, a fourth ROI metric that is impactful and gives you the rest of the equation to implement a program like this. Because on its surface, your colleagues they're going to come in and look at this and the infrastructure and the cost and the change behavior and all that stuff. It looks insurmountable at the beginning, but the reward is at the end if you take it on.
Thanks, Dave. And this is really important. And as we you saw Tim talk earlier about there was a little bit of regression going from 9% to 7% about reusability in the latest reports that came out. But as more and more of these systems get deployed and they're deployed around standards from whichever industry association sets the standards for identity and tracking technologies, the idea of federating that data, right? Federating, which is to share it and exchange it, then you can find the fraudsters. The amount of counterfeit is just in abuse and misuse is great, and that's another element that as we mature as an industry, we'll be able to tackle and address. So with that, let's talk a little bit about what are some of those additional benefits. Tim, can you think about where one of your customers came in and said, hey, we were intending to do this, but we discovered we actually found this, and that's a bigger ROI contributor?
Yeah, we actually had somebody wrapped around our brand security system, and RFID is a huge player in that. But if somebody's not ready or willing to take that step yet, you could still track through QR and barcode systems. But we had a customer that was supplying throughout the U.S., but then was using our software system and found their products being sold up in Canada and actually a little bit over in Africa through our brand secure system. So it was definitely a use case scenario where they just wanted to go in and do some authentication for their own clientele, but then they ended up finding that some of the materials were getting used in other countries as well. So they were able to isolate the issue and find what distributor and problematic source was utilizing that equipment.
That's great. And those forensic, if you will, forensic investigations, and then obviously just what are the actions you take, the penalties. Obviously, as service and system providers, you'll have a service level agreement, SLA. They'll indicate some things. So, Dave, can you relate as it relates to an SLA or some other things that, what were some additional benefits beyond what you already talked about?
Well, you bring in the focus, the SLA, and I think it warrants stating what a lot of people are warming up to and understanding is that some of these technologies are not 100%. They're just not. RFID is not 100%. And within even the same four walls, I get different results based on what's the asset that I'm tracking. We're working together with Orbis on a project where the totes, we're crushing it. We're 99.9% read rate on the totes coming through the door. But the sleeves that lay flat on each other and the RF tags are all stacked up on each other, we're struggling. And we've got to find creative ways to work around to obtain the visibility that we want to get for the hard to track assets. But I always share, though, at the end of the day, even if we're only 95%, which is the lower end that I think anyone should look at when they put in a sensor-based solution like this, I always challenge people, show me how many of your systems are actually performing at 95% or above, because most human systems are not at 95% or above. But there's a lot of nuances in the technologies that you're well-versed to have a partner who has experience working with the things that can help find the workarounds and educate on how we impact the workflow and the like.
Great. Mike, do you have some additionals?
Yeah, so to speak kind of to the concept there, the thing that you end up with is you build the trust once you get into this technology and you see that it works. I know we haven't gotten into it, and Clay, you might be speaking to this a little, but like the concept of blockchain, the fact that there is a distributed ledger where everyone shares the trust in the data. Going from the use case that you were talking about, Dave, where we've got operators that manually do counts and we're comparing it against the RFID reads that go through the portals, at what point do they begin to trust the level of the RFID because they're seeing a consistent accuracy against the secondary counts from the supervisors doing the follow-up rather than just the hourly labor doing their individual counts? So it's once you get the familiarity with it and you begin to trust the data, being able to go even further and look at what else can that do in your business that's the key.
Thank you, Clay.
I think two of the things that have got me most excited right now is creating some duplicate steps via automation. So if I'm going to scan that RFID tag on an asset, can I automate that within another process? For example, wrapping that asset, and then additionally load order information onto that asset. That tag is just a rewritable adhesive. I can put infinite amount of order information as that asset is used over and over again, and then send that downstream through the supply chain, whether that is for order confirmation, dispute resolution, auditing of the order accuracy. So I'm really excited about that idea and the ability to automate it. You mentioned human-based activities. You add in a step, there's a likelihood of it not being done. So if I can automate it, I eliminate that action from not taking place. And then as we build these data sets and we create a larger data pool, then starting to bring in generative AI and having an AI system look for abnormal behaviors or trends and calling those out. I think that is going to really start to supercharge some learnings within supply chains and like-minded individuals within verticals.
Great, thanks. So we've been here for about half an hour at this point. Let's just start wrapping up with a little bit of using their sage wisdom and the sage wisdom that we have up here. Tim, where would you suggest someone start as they start, thinking about how they're going to adopt that technology to their use case? Where would you advise them to start besides the label? No, you can start at the label.
It all starts with the label. Identifying people that are key in your company, in your organization, because bringing in different stakeholders within different departments. I was just talking with somebody today on who's going to pay for it, right? They want to implement it, but who's going to pay for it? Is it going to be IT? Is it going to be operations? So bringing in different stakeholders throughout the organization that can detect early problems or early issues right up front. So you're not handling those issues down the line, right? So that would probably be my biggest advice is have internal meetings, talk about who's going to head up the project, who's going to be the champion for it, and then go out there and find the resources that you need to find, right? I speak with a lot of people in organizations, and sometimes this hand and this hand doesn't even really know that this hand was looking into this, right? Find a champion inside that's going to understand the process, bring in the right people, and run with it.
It's great, and this whole idea of trusted advisors. We've heard that phrase a few times together, but effectively, vendors usually will have a better perspective on what's going on within your company, and just building that network. Dave, with that, you want to salt in some. What would be your sage advice to people how to get started, where to start, beyond what Tim said?
Two things that I would do is I would look for an early win, easy win, put on the board. I would probably look for a use case that has a low ROI threshold to get up and over, and run a proof of concept against that use case to prove the technology and which combinations of technologies. Beyond that, I would encourage reaching to your maybe friendly competitors who you have relationships with through associations or other networks that have already tripped and fallen before, and you can learn from them. There's already been a lot done, and you can learn and build off of those. And the last thing is find some quality partners that have experience in existing successes that you can build on when you bring them into your place.
So very similar to what Tim and Dave have said. Honestly, what I had written as kind of prep is start small. Start with something that you can be successful at. But with that, have a project sponsor that has an idea of the costs and the goals and the ability to get the organization to pivot if things are necessary based on the data that you're seeing and the feedback from your original small pilot.
Excellent. Thank
Much of it has already been said, so I won't repeat it. I'll take it in a slightly different direction, that when you decide that you do need to infuse technology into your supply chain, be proactive with it. It's much easier to do it when that product is being manufactured than having to go and retrofit. So whether there is a use case today or potentially one in the future, it's better just to be proactive in that approach. 20 cents, for a tag on an asset doesn't seem like much, but your purchasing team may push down and put some price pressure on you. So to your point around getting the right cross-functional stakeholders in that project, whether it's IT, the transformation group, I think that's critical. Otherwise, it'll die on the vine. And then if there is a need 1-2 years down the road, it's going to be significantly more expensive to deploy.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Let's open up some questions while we're waiting for the mic to get out. One of the questions that I'll put to the panel is, how do you future-proof around technology? How do you make sure that as you're looking at deploying something, that there's not something right around the corner that may be disruptive and challenge your ROI because it's going to change the value proposition? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'll jump on that one real quick. I had somebody come along and say RFID, it could be just a phase or whatever, but I heard a grandma say that the computers were just going to be a phase. I'm seeing a lot of technology coming within just the tags themselves. So the chips, the data sets, the amount of information, the read ranges. I think the technology within this technology is what's just taking over from one to the other, that there isn't another one. I mean, vision, AI can all be incorporated within the same technology and married with RFID. So I don't think it's going anywhere. I'm not worried about any of the technology in it. But there's definitely technologies it just keeps evaluating, and evolving on top of itself.
Thanks, Tim.
I would just add one piece to that. I think that's where the standard bodies are so important, so that there's some amount of backwards compatibility and that things integrate well together, because it's a scary thing having a giant investment and then all of a sudden something new or something sexier comes out tomorrow, So some of it could be vaporware, but some of it could really have some real use cases there. But the standards bodies creating a path forward with the existing technologies today is critical for the customer.
Hey, Mike, you were going to say?
And Dave, I'm going to steal your thunder on this. Is honestly, I wouldn't look at the technology as the end all be all. It's the what are you doing with the data? If the method of the data collection changes, fantastic. You can upgrade there, but it's setting the standards and your ability to use the information that's coming into you automatically. That's what you got to plan for.
Yeah, and thanks, guys, and that's so spot on. Do we have a question yet from the audience? If not, I'm just going to keep rolling. So, Amanda, if you can find someone that's got a question, put your hand up. Amanda, I'll get you a mic. So, recently, when I was at Qualcomm, I've had a 10-year plus initiative to integrate UHF RFID reader into handhelds. Okay, there was a Rain Alliance blog recently that my boss put out there. My previous boss, I should say, at this point, and it was about the fact that the Qualcomm Snapdragon is going to have a UHF RFID reader integrated in. That's a process in place, and that's going to be very disruptive because last year at this show we talked about interoperability to standards and the need to have standards, and then the diffusion of technology to bring down the cost of operating that technology is a big element. So that's a really positive trend. It doesn't obviate anything. It just changes the value and brings down the cost. And that's really good. So I'm going on a little bit for long in terms of making an observation, but guys, let's just talk about that. How do you see that type of disruption where you're going to have much lower cost, maybe different form factors of RFID readers that complement additional technologies? How do you see that benefiting the industry?
So I think the ability of having almost like a read anywhere is fantastic, but it's going to come with its own challenges because I know working with software companies and hardware companies, everyone wants to write in their own language. So now it might be Qualcomm's language, or it's Android, or it's Apple, or it's whomever the physical hardware manufacturer is, not just the chip, that you have to now account for, and how do you communicate with that? So it creates complications, but I think the ability to have an almost ubiquitous network is really what's going to be a game changer.
Yeah.
Assuming that gets solved.
Yeah.
Where it gets exciting is the one drawback to RFID technology is it's as good as the last scan. But if I can bring that last scan to the edge, now it becomes closer to real-time location tracking at the cost of an RFID tag. So the implications there are massive. You can track your assets no matter where they're at, as long as your driver or your operator or your merchandiser has that RFID reader on their person. It gets the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
So that would be real-time intelligence.
And so go ahead.
I wanted to add one more thing, and it was a shameless plug there, but one last thing. You mentioned it, Clay, but I'm going to call out a specific organization that, with the fragmented opportunities in front of us, there are some global organizations such as GS1 who are bringing standardization to allow disparate systems to talk together through these technologies and be able to communicate in a very similar fashion for some of the older folks in the crowd as, I just drew a blank on the technology, the transaction sets, EDI. EDI was enabled systems to talk in years past. GS1 standards are allowing some of these technologies to communicate and let you each do your own thing, yet still live inside the same ecosystem.
Yeah, and by the way, going into those details is beyond the time we have left, but really quick, Mike mentioned some standards, like there's low-level reader protocol, there's EPCIS, which is some standards for interoperability, APIs, application programming interfaces. The important thing, and I want to just clear up something real quick, is clearly industry standards organizations like GS1, like Rain Alliance, which is around RFI. GS1 is around data carriers and then the encoding of information in those data carriers. And then you have Digital Twins Consortium. There's people working at the Digital Twins. And to bring it back home, the Reusable Packaging Association and Technology Working Group, as well as a sustainable working group, We're working as an industry alliance on looking at those standards and what liaisons, what are the requirements that we can lay. And we've recently been awarded a USDA grant. And there's going to be pilots as well as proof of value around some closed loop applications on fresh produce and whatnot. And the point for that long-winded bit is this organization, the RPA, and member companies, and then people such as myself, technology consultants, come together to really look at where we need to be going as an industry and help guide that. So with that, are there any questions? Anyone have any last closing comments? Clay, do you have anything you want to close with?
Just that everyone at this stage right here is around the initiative of just getting more reusable products out into the market. There's absolutely environmental benefits there. There has to be a way that we can make that ROI positive. And the easiest path there is just injecting technology into that so that those assets will stay within their possession longer. You'll get more use cases there. You'll get more turns. So whatever we can do to move that forward and create really good alignment between whether it's ecosystem partners or like manufacturers, that's what we're here to do.
And then I was not going to go here, but with where we're at today, considering the EU and their digital product passport, looking to Europe to understand that other standards will come here, we can't just stop where we're at today. There is other technology benefits and requirements that we're going to see that will either be on returnables or expendables, but the data is necessary.
Dave, anything? You're good? Tim?
My last closing comments would be that if you're, whether you're at the beginning stages and you're just kicking rocks over, or you already have a legacy system in place, you're in the right place to learn all the information you need to get going. There's a plethora of good companies around here that can get you from A to B real quick. Excellent. And solve your issues. So
I want to thank all of you for taking time to 45 minutes to join us today to listen to each of us. I'd like to thank Clay and Mike, Dave, and Tim for the pleasure of collaboration and working with them over the years. And we'll do many more. And what's very interesting is this video will be published through the RPA portal, and you can view it again. You can share it with your friends, and obviously follow up with any of the panelists on any questions you have, either here today or after the panel, or at any time you can contact us. So again, thank you so much, and appreciate everybody. Thank you, guys.